welcome to my YouTube channel Eduventure SG. So let's do another interesting word problem on ratios. Let's start reading the question first. At first, the ratio of Mr. Tan's money to Mrs. Tan's money was 2:3. After Mr. Tan gave $100 to Mrs. Tan, the ratio of Mr. Tan's money to Mrs. Tan's money became 1:2. Find the amount that each of them had at first. Okay, so what we have here is that at first the ratio of Mr. Tan's money to Mrs. Tan's money was 2:3. So basically 2 belongs to Mr. Tan, okay, and Mr. Tan, and 3 belongs to Mrs. Tan, right? And when after Mr. Tan gave another $100 to Mrs. Tan, the ratio of Mrs. Tan's money, Mr. Tan's money to Mrs. Tan's money is 1:2. So here also the ratio is in the same order, Mr. Tan to Mrs. Tan. So what we have here is that at first the ratio was 2:3 and later it becomes 1:2, right? So let's start writing whatever we have, what information we have. So what we have here is at first what we have is Mr. Tan and Mrs. Tan. So what's their ratio? Their ratio is 2:3. That means if Mr. Tan is having 2 units, Mrs. Tan is having 3 units, right? Now what after Mr. Tan gave $100 to Mrs. Tan, the ratio changes, right? And it changes to what? It becomes 1:2, right? So we can write here later or at the end. So at end the ratio changes, right? In what way? We can say Mr. Tan becomes how many units? 1 unit, right? And Mrs. Tan became 2 units, right? Now from this, right, we can't inform much, right? If you read the question carefully, right, again this is a question on internal transfer. Why? Because the money is transferred from Mr. Tan to Mrs. Tan, right? It's not going outside. It's not that Mr. Tan is giving money to someone else, right? To his friends or someone. So basically the two people here, right, are Mr. Tan and Mrs. Tan, and the money is being transferred from Mr. Tan to Mrs. Tan. So this is a case of internal transfer, right? So that means since it's the money is only transferred from Mr. Tan to Mrs. Tan, the total amount of money before and after should be the same, right? The total amount of money before and after should be the same. So that means here that in terms of unit also, right, the total unit before and after should be the same, right? So for that we must calculate what was the total unit of money both of them have at first and at the end. So here you can say 2 plus 3 will give you 5 units, right? And how about here? What will be the total unit of money here? See, it's 1 unit plus 2 unit will give you 3 unit. Now as I said, the total should be the same, but here at first it looks like it's 5 unit and at the end it's 3 unit, but it should be same. So how can we make it same, right? I've told this before in many videos that we should be taking what? We should be taking least common multiple of 3 and 5, right? So we have to take the least common multiple of 3 and 5. So what's the least common multiple of 3 and 5? Right? You must have studied this in primary 4, right? So it's 15. So least common multiple of 3 and 5 is 15. Right? So that means the total here we should make equal to 15, both the places here and here, right? Because that's the least common multiple of 3 and 5. So how can we make here the 5 to 15, right? How can we, which number we multiply with 5 so that we get 15? So obviously it's 3, right? because 3 times 5 will give you 15. So the important thing to note here is that if you multiply the total here with 3, right, you must multiply other things as well with 3. For example, the units of Mr. Tan and Mrs. Tan with 3, right? So we have to do the same operation on others as well. So 2 times 3 will give you 6, and 3 times 3 will give you 9. So see here, now it's see 6 unit plus now 9 unit is will give you 15 units, right? And it's necessary also, because if we keep Mr. Tan just 2 units and Mrs. Tan will 3 unit, see 2 plus 3 won't give you 15. So we have to multiply Mr. Tan and Mrs. Tan's unit also with 3. So now see, the both will give you, the sum of this will give you 15. Now how do we make 3 units to 15, right? How can we change, with what number we multiply 3 so that we get 15? So obviously it's 5, right? So we must multiply all the other Mr. Tan's and Mr. Tan's money as well with 5, the units with 5. So it will give you 5 unit, this one will give you 10 units, and this one will give you 15 units. See here, 5 plus 10, 15. So now they are same, right? You can see here the total at first and the total at the end are same, right? Now let's compare the units of Mr. Tan's money at first and at the end. See, earlier Mr. Tan was having 6 unit, and later he was having 5 unit. So you can see here there is a change of how many units? There's a change of 1 unit, right? There's a change of 1 unit, and actually there's a decrease of 1 unit, right? So you can say that 6 unit minus 5 unit, right, it will give you 1 unit. So Mr. Tan's money, right, Mr. Tan's money is decreasing, right? Mr. Tan's money has decreased, right? And how about Mrs. Tan's money? See, earlier she was 9 unit, later she became 10 units. So there is basically there is an increase of 1 unit. There was a decrease of 1 unit for Mr. Tan, and there is an increase of 1 unit for Mrs. Tan, right? Here you can see it became from 9 unit become 10 units, right? So how about the difference here? So again, you can see the difference is of 1 unit, right? So you can say that, okay, Mrs. Tan's money has increased, right? So it increased. So what do we get from here? See, if you notice it, right, the change in the unit of Mr. Tan is same as the change in the unit of Mrs. Tan. So what I mean is Mr. Tan money has decreased by 1 unit, and Mrs. Tan money has increased by 1 unit, right? The change is same, right? Why there is a change? Why there is a decrease in Mr. Tan's money? Because Mr. Tan has given $100 to Mrs. Tan, right? Because Mr. Tan has given $100 to Mrs. Tan. So that's why Mr. Tan's money has decreased and Mrs. Tan's money has increased. Mrs. Tan's money has increased, right? And how much is the change? So the change in terms of unit is 1 unit, right? So we can say that, okay, 1 unit is $100, right? The change has become because Mr. Tan has given $100 to Mrs. Tan, right? And the change is equal to $100. Now let's read what's the final question. Like, find the amount that each of them had at first. Okay, at first is important. So see here, Mr. Tan was having 6 unit at first, right? So we can say, okay, at first Mr. Tan was having how many units? He was having 6 units. That is equal to 6 times 100. That will give you 600, right? That will give you 600. So Mr. Tan was having $600 at first. Now how about Mrs. Tan? So at first Mrs. Tan was having how many units? 9 units, right? So she was having 9 times 100. Okay, that will give you $900, right? That means at first Mr. Tan was having $600 and Mrs. Tan was having $900, right? So we can write our answer quickly here, that Mr. Tan was having $600 at first and Mrs. Tan was having $900 at first, right? So that's our solution. Hope you liked it. Keep watching and don't forget to subscribe my channel. Thank you.